Okay, 70, 80 years ago, if you told someone you were going for a run, they would have sort of looked at you for a blanking expression, who's chasing you type thing. Things have changed. This day and age, even though some top business people, athletes, use mindfulness, meditation, there's still people, when you tell them you're going to go and do some mindfulness and meditation, some yoga, they look at you like from a different planet, so to speak. And that's okay, because I truly believe that there'll be a time when it becomes an integral part of your day. Just like brushing your teeth, just like doing anything you do throughout the day, going for a run. There'll be points during the day where you do mindfulness, meditation, yoga even. A lot of research now suggests of the benefits of it. Okay? There's a lot of research out there. The only thing I would say, and I will touch on today, is something to take into consideration. It might work for some people, it might not work for others. If one doesn't feel safe, and you ask them to be mindful, and just sit there and alone with your thoughts, there's nowhere to run. Okay, fight, flight, freeze, and it won't work in the same way it would work if someone builds up to that. So I can touch on that as we go along, because it's everywhere now, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I've wrote programs on the topic. But equally, my experience over many years, I know how it's an individualized thing. And your clients, your patients, a lot of them are going to have experienced trauma on some level, and we know what trauma does to the brain. And in view of that, it may not be appropriate for that person if they don't feel safe. Okay? But there's other things that they can do, which I'll touch on. They can help along the way. Okay. I'm going to sort of, because you've probably got an experiential curiosity as well, intellectual curiosity, but what I will do before I do a full circle, and when we come back after the break, we'll do a lot of experiential stuff. I want to sort of do a process with you before I sort of hit you for a lot of theory, and then we'll come back and do some practical stuff. The process that we're going to do is going to involve our nerves, the oculomotor nerve, it's going to involve the facial nerve, it's going to involve the glossopharyngeal nerve, and the vagus nerve. Now, you've probably heard a lot about the vagus nerve recently, okay, and you'll hear a little bit more because it's important, okay. I'm going to guide you through a technique. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing the seminar from an educational point of view. I'm not making any recommendations what you do or you don't with your clients. You know the range of movement, you know what's applicable for them, and equally if they're getting clinical help, as well as if you're not working at the clinical side for psychology, it might be worth interacting with whoever's seeing them clinically to say, okay, do you suggest? I possibly suggest this process if it's appropriate and applicable. It's a very useful process to calm the system down. But before I hit you with theory, I'd like you to try the process, and it involves slow breathing. Okay, so what I'd like you to, if you're comfortable doing so, is if you place your hand on your tummy. Okay. As you place your hand on your tummy, just breathe at a pace comfortable to you. Expanding your tummy, breathing deep, and just getting into a comfortable ratio. I'm not going to give you a ratio because I know some people who can breathe deep, yoga people who can breathe forever. Okay, and some people who've got various conditions may not be able to breathe as deep. So giving them a figure might not be a good idea. Maybe just saying what you're comfortable doing. But the deeper the breath, the more you're going to calm the nervous system down. So as you breathe deeper and you're using your tummy to breathe, your stomach to breathe, what I'd like you to do is to, there's a method in madness, by the way, and I'm going to guide you through it. The first thing I'd like you to do is to stimulate the facial nerve, maybe posturally, begin to, or think of a time that you're amused or funny or happy. Okay, by stimulating the facial nerve or smiling, if you're comfortable doing that, then you can start to stimulate the ocular nerve as well, and just serene eyes, a time you're calm on a beach or in a park in Leeds, a nice day like today, and just exhale, nice calm exhale to stimulate the glossopharyngeal nerve. And you can sort of repeat that. Okay, so basically, inhale, stimulate the vagus nerve. And as you exhale, nice smile, calm the eyes, and breathe out. You can if you want to. The ratio I use me personally, that may not work for you, is I tend to breathe in about 6 seconds, and I've built up towards that, and I hold for a second or so, and then I exhale about the equal amount. Now, some people will debate that. It's their call. That's what works for me. If I do that 10 times when I feel a bit anxious, I feel myself settle. Okay? So it's the practicality. So I'm going to run through that very briefly so we can inhale nice and deep through the tummy to stimulate the vagus nerve. And then once you've done that, as you exhale, we can sort of stimulate the facial nerve by smile, by chemistry, okay? The mind-body link, and the eyes being serene will calm the oculomotor nerve, and a nice calm exhale to stimulate the glossopharyngeal nerve. So that's sort of giving you an insight to things to come along, okay? I know some people, and there is the debate around mind-body, but when you're nervous before an exam, there are times you need to go for a wee. There are times that people get stressed to get highs. So let's sort of think for one moment, the system being one, okay? And we can discuss things at a later date, other ideas. Okay, so for me, it's about states. Okay, in therapy, the goal is to go from maladaptive to adaptive states. Okay, and what we mean by that is, what am I doing? What should I be doing? Okay, a 5-year-old perhaps might start learning to tie the shoelace up. A 10-year-old might start learning to ride a bike. But more specifically, adaptive, someone might have a significant event in their life, and they don't go out no more, social avoidance. And the goal might be for them to just go for a walk to the shop. Okay? But equally, what's really important for that to happen is their states. We listen to music to change our states. We watch films to change our states. Don't rush out and watch this film, by the way. I want to sort of touch on a theory that you may or may not have come across before. It's by Stephen Porges. And I sort of came across it many years ago now. He developed it in 1994. I don't profess to be an expert in the theory, by the way, or any of his theories, but I know enough to know what I know and to share some of my ideas. I'm an expert in my field, in the field I'm in, and I've been very fortunate to have some great mentors, some of the best in the world in my field. But equally, I'm not naive enough to think I have all the answers. I've not met him. I'd like to. It was through my own research. I started to ask a few questions. And some of the things, questions I had, and I would read his books and look at his research papers, it answered a lot of things. I've worked in sport highest level, in business, I've worked with clients. I've also worked in care homes in education. And I used to wonder sometimes how some young people would struggle to, when you introduce relaxation to them. And I had the realization that actually some of them had, and all things being equal, we all have events in our life, but some of them never, you would ask them and talk about their life in general, and it sort of occurred to me one time, I was delivering education, that was my remit, deliver education, and I was speaking to a young girl, and she was, I sort of introduced her to the relaxation techniques, and she said that I struggled to close my eyes and relax, and delve a little bit deeper, and I found that she never felt safe growing up. There was no one in the family she felt safe around. And that to me signals trauma. Because trauma is not just fighting in a war, by the way. Trauma can be domestic violence, it can be abandonment, it can be many things. It can be an accident. You sure come across people with impact injuries, and that can impact the way they think and feel as well. So that sort of led me down that path to think, okay, what else can we do? What else is there? Okay, so briefly, according to the work by the Polyvagal Theory, it's new insights into reactions of the automatic nervous system. So basically it says there's 3 circuits that are recognized and respond to challenges in phylogenetic history, determined hierarchy with the Jacksonian principle of dissolution. But we'll go into that in more detail. There's quite a useful research paper. You get a chance to read that, and you can have the slides if you want to. But I want to sort of crack on. Long story short, through his work, Porges revealed that the vagus nerve controls the automatic nervous system actually had two active branches. Okay, the myelinated branch, responsible for parasympathetic action of lowering the heart rate, and the unmyelinated. Okay, and the unmyelinated part as well. Now, it's important because if we think of the nervous system, the vagus nerve runs from the medulla of the brain, the back of the brain, all the way down the viscera. Okay, so there's a connection there. So stay with me. He coined the phrase neuroception. It's a system that determines whether or not situations people determine are life-threatening, safe or dangerous. So safe or dangerous or life-threatening. Okay, so hold that thought when I mentioned earlier about someone struggling to be mindful, so to speak, and just be, and we'll sort of get that as we go along. So neuroception is outside the conscious awareness. Okay, we're not really aware of it. It's very fast, and we've got limited control over it. It's very implicit. Okay, I once worked with a client. Well, she wasn't a client. She attended one of my courses one time, and she would tell me whenever she got home after work at about 6 o'clock in the evening, she'd really struggle to get really anxious and social avoidance. We wouldn't go back out no more. I did some regression with her to go into a bit more detail, and it so happened to be she had this schema, an association that was so implicit. The dog barking next door set off the alarm bell in the brain, and she built a connection. And the dog barking next door, the same sort of bark as one that bit her as a child. So it could be the air conditioner could remind you of fighting in Afghanistan. It could be you see a red car, it reminds you of the car you get hit by. It could be you see a person's face, and it sort of has an impact on how you feel and think, which we'll get to as we go along. So there's three circuits that control our reactivity and potentially cause us to become immobile. Okay, and that's really important because we've got a primitive component. Okay, and the most primitive component we share with most vertebrates to have a spine. It's dependent on the oldest branch of the vagus nerve. Okay, and it's unmyelinated. Sorry, it originates, as I mentioned, the dorsal nucleus of the brainstem. So all nerves. I don't know. I know some of you have been practicing for a long time, and some haven't. And I know some of you come from different backgrounds. So I'll sort of do my very best to bring things equal. But equally, you may. I mean, I'm going to work on the basis that we've got a little bit of time, and some of you have got information. Some of you haven't been practicing, maybe just new in the field. Some may just be here and starting your journey. So when you think of myelination, unmyelinated, think of electrical wire. Okay, if I've got electrical wire in my house, I'm having problems at the moment because I had a pipe that burst in the winter time, but it's drying out now. But you've got wire there, you've got insulation. What happens if you've got no insulation electrical wire? Yeah, precisely. Okay, not good, is it? Not going to run really smooth, one would think. So what will run smoother? Insulation, non-insulation? I think insulation is going to run smoother. Okay, so we talk about myelin. If our nerve fibers have myelin sheath insulation, which just happens to be fatty tissue around them, then the myelination is more efficient. The nerve bundle is going to be more smooth. The highway is going to run smoother. Okay, nice and smooth. It's like getting on the motorway after peak traffic. It's going to flow nicely. If you get on the motorway early in the morning, there's a lot of traffic and people cutting in everywhere, your journey is going to take a lot longer than what it would normally take. One thing to consider, that myelin is late, or fairly late in development of evolution. Okay? As I said, you want more information, you can email me. I've got to condense this as much as I can do, but give you what you need to go for. So it's late, and this will make sense as we go along. It's important to know that part of the vagus nerves that are not myelinated are just raw nerves. No insulation, they're very primitive. So the nervous system, we can think this part of it anyway, is quite primal. Okay? Quite primitive. The non-myelinated nervous system. And that's quite significant, as we'll touch on. And when we do techniques and be more practical, more user-friendly after the break, you'll see why it's significant. And you'll see why my choice of interventions are quite strategic. Okay? As a therapist, I'm impulsive strategic in the sense that I'm very flexible, but I have a strategy and I have a formulation. Okay? You guys, or most of you anyway, do it different to what I deal with. Cognitive, physical side, for the most part, it's still worth to know that, okay, so the vagus nerve starts to place the dorsal motor nucleus. It's bilateral. It comes out both sides of the brainstem. Okay? So it's the huge highway from the brain to the gut. Okay? And it connects to the lungs. It goes down the liver, the gallbladder, stomach, spleen, large intestine. Okay? It connects the small intestine, controls the rectum, kidney, urinary bladder, urinary system, reproductive system, both men and women, and directly connects the brain to all of the viscera. Now, let me put it this way, okay, because you're probably wondering at this point, have you ever had food poisoning before? You've had food poisoning before? Okay. What happens once you've had food poisoning? When you see the same food again? Would you eat it again? No, you won't eat it again because the brain is keeping you alive. That's the primary purpose of the brain. It's going to shut down. Okay? Another story for another day, we have the same reaction in certain situations where we hear information as well. Okay? And that tends to center around when people do or say things that aren't in our moral compass. Say if you heard about someone being mugged, on the street, it was outside the moral compass, it would bring out the same sort of churning feeling. Okay? And that's a given. I can send information on that, which is significant because we start building connections. And if you learn nothing else from today, you'll probably learn this. If you have a date, don't take them to a bad restaurant because I'll associate that to you, the gut feeling, food, with that sort of connection. Okay, so the umbilical part of the vagus is the most primitive component. Both sides of the brainstem, we mentioned there, dorsal motor nucleus, is very ancient and primitive, and that's sort of a bit of a problem really, in one sense, because it causes us to freeze. Okay, has anyone ever frozen in perception? We've appraised a situation of danger. Okay, whenever we see danger, you feel like in a life-threatening situation, we freeze. Okay, or we might fight. Or we might run, which is another story for another day. But at this point, we're sort of focusing on this. Okay? And that's the first system. Okay? The second system is one you're probably going to be more familiar with before we reach the first system. And that's basically just fight or flight behavior. Okay? And all that is really the part of the brain, the thalamus gets information from all the senses. Okay? And then what it does, the amygdala pre-screens for danger. Okay, information from the hippocampus, past dangerous events. I've eaten that food before, I've got poisoning, and when we sort of evolved as a species, if you ate those berries, or someone you tried out the berries, and they they got really ill, or something bad happened, and you got ill, then you built the connection and not to eat them again. Okay, so really the information is stored in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. So you've got the ability to recognise and appraise the situation. Not all situations are dangerous, by the way, that we appraise as being dangerous. Well, they might not be dangerous to you, but they might be dangerous for the person that you're working with. So public speaking, for example, people talk about public speaking or flying in an aeroplane. Statistically not dangerous as such, but the appraisal people give them and the experience they've had around those situations influence their perception of that situation. The amygdala activates the hypothalamus to trigger fear response, the adrenaline response. Okay? The amygdala deactivates the rational brain. The brain that you have, the rational brain, the neocortex, gets deactivated. Which is why it's not a good idea, for example, in business world, for the managers to put a lot of pressure on the staff. Because actually what they're doing is they're taking away a part of the brain that the conscious part of the brain, the logical part of the brain, executive functioning part of the brain, in sport is the same. You see top athletes go to type and perception of the situation, the amygdala, the rational brain, and they can't take the penalty, for example, in the shootout. They go back to a point where they didn't know what to do. Okay? So, from the point of view of someone you're working with, you're looking at, say, a timeline of events. So for them, something simple for you might be very challenging for them, so to speak. But that's sort of something to think about. So really, if we're doing exams, we want to go to process. There's things we can do we're going to touch on, like visualization, rehearsal. They're really useful things we can do. Neuroplasticity. They used to say, there was a point in the 60s, neuroplasticity was about, that's it, what you were born with. But now we know we're always building new connections in the brain. And the neurogenesis in the 80s demonstrated that we could produce new neurons in the brain. The only thing is that we know that they die after a certain age, but equally we can produce new ones. How long they last, no one knows at the moment. No one knows, as far as I'm aware, but we can produce new things. So the thing for me is what I do, I tend to do new tasks all the time. Okay, so maybe play darts left-handed if I'm right-handed, go to work another way, walk around the lake a different way. So doing new things all the time is quite useful to produce new neurons in the brain. Okay, so the glands release chemicals called hormones, and they're active molecules that create moods and emotion. Okay, that hasn't a great deal to do with the vagus nerve, by the way, which you've touched on, but that's your fear response in a nutshell. The third system, okay, the social system of social communication engagement is controlled through facial expression, okay, vocalization and listening, all of which are dependent on the newest branch in the vagus nerve. And I'm going to touch on this after the break, okay, because you can sort of see through someone's facial expression, and we're going to touch on that in more detail, hence stimulate the facial nerve. The eye's serene. You can see that, okay? I've had clients come in to see me, and I can see that they are or have been in a traumatized state just by facial expression, vocalization, and listening, okay? And that can also have an effect on them too. And they're depending on the newest part of the brain, the myelinated branch of the brain. Okay, so it's got lots of insulation. Okay, it's in the nucleus ambiguous of the brainstem, like we discussed previously. The dorsal motor nucleus is the unmyelinated parts, comes out of that. This one here is in the nucleus ambiguous of the brainstem. So they're right next together, and it controls social engagement and how we are with people. Now, you may have had clients before. Well, if you didn't know them previously, when you see them, but maybe their family say they've had a big personality change. Has anyone ever come across that before, where members have changed dramatically? Now, that could be because if you cut your finger, you're not going to change a great deal behaviourally. If you damage a part of your brain about the size of your fingernail, you could have a big change in persona. But equally, all things said and done, there could be other situations where the person changes. So it changes. Interaction can change. Huge. And that can happen. And I'm sure you experienced one session, the client might come in and they feel a certain way. Next session, they feel differently. And you think it might be down to you. It could be down to something you say. It could be down to the way you speak, your vocal tone, the way you look at the person. Things that are implicit. And the more self-aware you are, the better you'll do. Because the most important thing is, we're going to talk about as we go along, is promoting a safe environment. Okay? The more safe, and what's safe for one person if somebody else, the person is, the better response you're going to get. Okay? Let me put it this way, in plain English, for a moment. So it inhibits defensive aggressive strategies. prevents those strategies from activating, and it promotes and activates pro-social strategies. So for example, if I go out and leave of an evening, okay, beautiful summer's evening like tonight, and I go to a bar, okay, and I grab a drink, if someone comes up to me and spills the drink all over me, you probably won't be very happy, but it's very unlikely you're going to lash out at that person. Well, you might do, I don't know, but it's very unlikely, okay? Very unlikely. The likelihood is you'll accept the apology, or if they're abrupt, you might just walk away and think there's no great point. Okay, so that's the part of the brain, and that's a nerve that can do that. It promotes a social strategy. If for whatever reason, there are certain people who don't or may not behave that way, they might strike that person without a thought of consequence. The consequence of striking someone because they spill a drink over you is quite high. It's not contextual, is it? It doesn't fit the context. Unless you've got a really nice drink, it might be a different story. But the point being, it's all contextual, isn't it, really, when you think about it that way, in one sense. If someone's chasing you with a knife, then equally you're going to respond differently. So things are a matter of context. We want to take into consideration. So just a very brief overview before we sort of carry on and go forward. Of the polyvagal and behavioural strategies involved. You've got safe and non-threatening environmental, social and communication engagement. Okay. Also, the phylogenetically, it's the youngest myelinated nerve. Okay. It engages parasympathetic, long-term and survival subsystem. It returns to normal restorative action and fosters calm, maintains homeostasis, ongoing homeostasis, and supports social communication and engagement activities and promotes growth. The body knows what to do. Okay? The first thing I do as a therapist when people come to see me with anxiety, before I do anything else, I get them to breathe properly. Okay? I have a background in hypnosis amongst many other things, and people come to me a lot for pain relief, and they come for me to see for anxiety. The first thing I do, by the way, if they come for anxiety and pain, I get them to go see a medical person first, because I'm not a medical person, because it could be an underlying biological issue that I'm not equipped to deal with. Okay? But all things being well, then I can't work with them. It just means that it moves the goalpost. So I might treat someone for pain relief. By anxiety, it turns out sometimes it can be treated for. So it's not a good idea to do that. Okay, and I had I wouldn't say a debate, but a mini debate with a group of chiropractors one time, and I suggested if someone comes in for pain, it might be best served they go get the pain checked out. Well, why, Jim? Because if there's a tumour 6 months later, not good, is it? So, okay, but more to the point, when I say the body knows what to do, my clients who've got anxiety, I get them breathing properly again. Because it's very unlikely, unless you've got a sleep condition, like apnea, you have a panic attack when you're asleep. The body knows what to do. You breathe normally. So I get them breathing normally. I get them breathing deeper. Where it's appropriate, they've got a range of movement, I get them doing what we did earlier. Okay? And the reason for doing that is to stimulate certain nerves and muscles. Okay? In the body, the mind and body. Okay? I've seen people posturally walk in certain ways and speak in certain ways from a safety point of view. I get them doing things like bounding as well, to just open the posture up, be more relaxed, because the body knows what to do. And after we've done the breathing and they start breathing well again, because how do anxiety patients breathe, do you think? Fast and shallow. You breathe fast and shallow, what happens? You hyperventilate. So breathe deeper, and then we can start working with cognitive appraisal, and so on and so forth. Okay? So we've got the dangerous environment mobilization. We talked about before. So phylogenetically, the older sympathetic adrenaline circuits, okay, engage the sympathetic first line in defense in the subsystem, okay, which is not always appropriate. If I see a wild dog chasing me, it might be appropriate to engage in that to make myself safe, okay. If otherwise, it may not be appropriate and it's all about context as well, which is key. But you know that if someone looks at it the wrong way, okay, I'm sure you've all come across situations where people have been very unproportionate to their behaviour. Someone may have looked at them the wrong way and they struck him. Okay, maybe that they had an event in their life and they're afraid to go back outside again, even just walk 100 yards down the road, and you can't understand it because you're seeing it with your vision, but in their own mind they're seeing the world different to you. So they're going into that defensive fight-flight mechanism because primarily your brain is designed to keep you alive. Okay, that's the primary goal of emotion of the brain. So it phylogenetically, the oldest unmyelated part of the vagus nerve engages last line of defense subsystem, feigns death, be able to shut down or freeze. Okay, and that's important as we go along. I'm going to link that to what we're going to do after the break, by the way. I've got a bit more to cover before the break, which is important. In my journey in research as well along the way, I sort of look at all West and East. I don't believe we have all the answers. I don't believe anyone has. I think science has taken us to the edge of a pier, but there's an ocean out there. When I sort of, on my journey of learning, and I've studied in many places, I came across chakras. And you might think this guy is out of his mind, presenting to people in the field of science, chakras. Well, for me, I talked about the work of Steve Porges. Now, I think thousands of years ago, there's always someone who gets there earlier than you. And when I read the work of chakra, I thought, well, actually, as it happens, there's almost like a link here, okay, which is quite fascinating. But we don't have to go into too much detail, just enough for you to know what you need to know. And when I cover some techniques afterwards, you'll think, okay, there is a specific purpose for doing that. So remember we talked about the theory, the Polyvagal Theory, and we've got 7 chakras. Now, whether you want to call them that or call them something else is entirely up to you. Okay? But the point being is that we sort of look at the 7th one. It's the top of the head, pineal, pituitary, the 6th one, the thyroid, the 5th one, the heart sternum, the 4th one, the solar plexus, 3rd one, 2nd one, tailbone, spine. Think vagus nerve and what it connects to. Okay, and think what we're getting at here. So in Hindu and some other beliefs, chakras are key energy points in the body that are situated in major junctions of arteries, veins, and nerves. See, I have a fascination around science too, and I try and work out things scientifically. If I was going to explain the science behind this, it'd probably take me the next 6 hours. I don't have that, so I'll go into as much as I can in the time I've got to give you something to work with. We'll do some practical stuff. But I'm going to sort of show you as we go along. It's fascinating. So the chakras are the so-called subtle body, and there's 7 chakras considered to be important and most important. The subtle body is thought to comprise of ego, the human feeling we're separate from. Where do our thoughts come from anyway? Mind, brain, does anyone really know? No one's worked it out at this point. Okay, so just a very brief introduction. Flowing within our bodies is energy that drives and maintains life functions. This energy flows not only within our bodies, but also through the very fabric of the universe, so to speak. So they say. You take what you think is right for you. Okay? Ultimately, I can't prove that there is a Santa Claus, but I can't prove otherwise. I'm not naive enough to think that science has all the answers. Because I've been doing what I do for a number of years, and there are things that even the best scientists cannot explain. And I think when we sort of make our way through some of this stuff, you'll realise that it's almost like things have merged. We've done a full circle in many things that we do these days. Hence mindfulness. We're using 4,000-year-old traditions and bringing them to the now and trying to adapt them without realising, well, actually the world's a different place than it was then, but we're going to realise that there's a lot we don't know. So in ancient traditions, people call the energy ki or prana, the basic life force. Okay? Many other ancient cultures believe that there are 7 major points of intersection for flow of this energy. Okay? And they're located on the spine and key branches of the human nervous system. These points are sent upward from the tailbone, top of the skull, and they're called chakras. So there's a bit of a familiar theme when we sort of think about the first three we talked about. Chakra is Sanskrit, the word meaning for wheel or circle. The name is appropriate because energy tends to swirl around in circular motion, and it gathers in chakras like a vortex. Chakras are often described as wheels of light. Okay, they often depicted as lotus flowers with a number of different petals for each one. Various traditions associate specific colour for each chakra. According to many cultures, balancing this energy flow, chakra balance is internal to one's overall physical, emotional, and mental health. So they say. Okay, so you can't see them. You can't see them in an autopsy. The existence is well documented in ancient healing and spiritual disciplines of the Far East. Okay, the Far East has very heavily influenced a lot of my work because I went as far as I could to a point in modern science, and I thought, well, albeit I've come back to it again now, it left me with more answers or more questions than answers. Okay, I'm one with an open mind. I see myself as a possibilitarian, an open-minded person. But it's quite interesting, really. In traditional Indian medicine, each chakra in the spinal column is believed to influence or govern bodily functions in each region of the spine. So you can sort of start drawing parallels we've talked about so far. Okay, without going into too much detail, each chakra is associated with a specific kind of energy related to human attributes, from the most primal to spiritual. The lowest chakras govern more primal, physical aspects of human existence, while the upper chakras are associated with one's spiritual growth, evolution, consciousness. So, when we talk about chakra balancing, we talk about techniques that they use to do this. And that's what I'm interested in, as well as understanding some of their theory, which I could debate if I really wanted to. And I could debate, we could all debate anything. Nothing has a statistical power to be completely reliable. It might in 100 years, or give or take, we embrace technology to test, but we can all challenge a hypothesis. We can all challenge, we know that a lot of the papers that are published aren't as reliable as we'd like them to be. People are under pressure, publish or perish, and so on and so forth. So for me, you do your own research as well as, and decide what's right for you. So it's creating a balance, mind, body, and spirit. And the way they do that is pretty similar to what many people are saying now we should start doing in science, at least in neuroscience. And what they're doing is things like aromatherapy, mantras, meditation, Reiki, hands-on healing, flower essences, sound therapy, colour, light therapy, and these aren't exhaustive, name a few. Quite fascinating, isn't it? They seem to know something all those thousands of years ago, and now we're kind of thinking, okay, maybe we start to think along them lines. So something I want to introduce you afterwards is deep meditation, where it's appropriate, mindfulness, and things that you can do that work for you. It's got to work for you. The Shin Sun Do way of divine, that's a Korean mind body spirit discipline, and there's a system for achieving spiritual completion through the chakras. They have their own way with the goal of being more consciously aware. So the more conscious you are, we talked about neuroception earlier, the more conscious you are, the more aware you are, self-awareness, emotionally, physically, okay, the better chance you've got of being more adaptive. And there's a modernized version that was adapted for modern times. And I sort of showed you the chart earlier, the 7 ones, and we sort of looked at the relocation as well. Very, very briefly. So the base of the spine, the sacral chakra, lower abdomen, the solar plexus, the 3rd one, upper abdomen, 4th one, heart chakra of the chest, throat. And it's quite fascinating. We talked earlier about how what we say, how we speak, how we hear people impacts what we do. Breathing, a location behind, between the eye, very top of the head. So the characteristics of the chakras, and there's a sequence that starts from upwards and denote a transcendence from the physical to the spiritual, energy flows and upwards, and the negative energy in opposite direction down. So the spiral. I can email you this. I'm sort of mindful of time. I've got a lot I want to cover and give you a break as well. What I want to say is you choose what's safe for one person and not for another. For me, some of the things I do, and I'm going to sort of go into more detail, which are quite useful, is some of the things I do that I think have an impact on the vagal nerve, vagus nerve, is I have a cold shower every day. And that helps me a lot, and I recommend that to the athletes I work with. If they're comfortable doing the ice bath, then that's something they can do, albeit, things have moved on since then. But that might be appropriate for all people. Okay. Other things include walking. It's quite useful as well. Taking time out, as and when possible, meditating, yoga. Your patients may not have the range of movement to do certain things in yoga, but they may do other things, which are quite useful too, and that's helping parts of the brain. And if parts of the brain through trauma aren't working well, what better way to help them start getting functionality through experiential processes that change. So systems, from a human being point of view, systems can be closed, isolated, or they can be open. Human activity exists as an open system. You are an open system. If you're a human being, you're an open system. Predictions are very difficult to make in open systems. Okay? It's very difficult to make a prediction. Prognosis, diagnosis serves to a point, but for me, I don't treat the prognosis diagnosis. It's useful. I build a map. And the map that I build is in my modality. I ask the person experientially what they're going through. And we work towards what we can work. No one can make any guarantees for anybody, but we can all live in hope or despair. And the narrative you tell yourself will have a big impact on what you do. Okay? But going forward, we want to think that biology influences health and health behaviour. Infection, physical trauma, hormones, nutrition. There's so much you can do, or so much any of us can do. I'm not in the business of promising people and telling them, building false hope. I'm also not in the business of dismissing things. You may have heard of stories before. 65-year-old woman runs out to lift a car. The grandchild stuck underneath. That shouldn't happen, but it does, albeit damage a lot of their muscles and so on and so forth, but it happens. How it happens, it's anybody's guess. Many theories, but theories is an idea. Psychological influence may include emotions, attitude, self-control in who we are. Social factors have an impact on health and health behaviour. The people around, economic status, family, support as well. Okay, they all interact for me to combine to an individual's health or health behaviour. For me, we want to avoid being a reductionist in the sense that we put it down to one thing. Biology, psychology, or sociology. For me, it's being truly holistic. And I'm not saying being a chakra healer is being holistic, because it's not. Okay? I've debated people in that field before too. Because, for example, if one chakra, so-called chakra, is out of alignment, or you could make that claim about the person feeling a certain way down to a chakra, well, equally, you could also say the person could have a traumatic injury. They could have a bereavement, which is sort of inflicting the way they feel. So for me, it's opening every stone, being truly holistic. So the person who talks about being a chakra healer is more reductionist than the person they claim is a reductionist. They might say, well, the medical person is reductionist because they just use medication. I'm not for or against medication, and certain conditions do require it, no doubt. I'm not a medical person. In my field, I truly believe that, well, not necessarily my field, but I think in general, I long for the day when people say they feel down and go see a GP, they're taught to meditate, to go for a walk, to do techniques that are non-intrusive. Meditation is not an intrusive process in the sense that it's going to cause you any danger. If you don't like doing it, then don't do it. Splashing cold water in your face is not necessarily as intrusive as many things. So whilst I'm not a medical person, I do understand people need to take medications, for example, like depressants or whatever they take. It's entirely up to them. Equally, let's think holistic. Because, very briefly before we surmise, say, to sort of societal learning, so someone will have anxiety or have alcohol problem, and the doctor might say it's genetic, and decide biological intervention is necessary because of their profession. Okay, they might decide that. For me, on the other side of things is the psychologists may believe someone who drinks excessively is down to wanting to escape the way they feel. I think it's psychological. Okay, they might treat alcohol for depression. They might treat depression for alcohol, for example. Or anxiety, they might use an appraisal situation, but ignore the biology. Okay, we know if you drink 20 cups of coffee a day, you can do all the appraisal you want. And I know in my experience, people have seen nutritionists can help to regulate chemicals in the body and have a big impact on the way they feel. So, about being holistic, the sociologist starts to think, okay, it's the environment. They need to get out of that environment, the people around them, the work, whatever. So what I'm trying to get at here, depending on what profession you're in, you're going to lean towards. So while all three might be right to a degree, the fact is not one of these responses addressed the complete problem. None of us all the answers, I'm afraid. Okay, so collectively, it's multifactorial. Okay, no, for me, single modality or no single person or no single empirical science as all the answers to all things. That's my philosophy. Okay, having that open mind. Okay, and the belief in itself can have a big impact. So very briefly, we have a short break, and I've done a lot of theory, but you can go over it again. You can email them to give you as much information as you want to. And I make no apologies for doing the theory because it is important to know I'm not just plucking processes out of the sky. They're very calculated and methodical, so that the cool swim in the bath can be quite useful. Okay, but that might be intrusive for some people, and if it doesn't work for them, then don't do it. Okay, for me it works. Okay, it works really, really well. For my athletes it works well too, but some of them it doesn't work well for. We don't do it. That. I might say we'll go cryotherapy. Doesn't work for them. That's fine. Don't do it. But do what works for you. Okay? Exercises that we talked about earlier that are being promoted in science now, that were being done 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, yoga. Okay? There's been so much research around yoga. I could just throw you so much research around yoga. It's phenomenal how powerful yoga is, the breathing and the impact around trauma. Okay, without going into too much detail around trauma, it is absolutely powerful. But equally saying that with your patients, the range of movement could be a problem in certain situations. But do what you can and see what you can do. Meditation, we mentioned earlier, it may work for some people, not for others. Okay, mindfulness. It's about extending it, making things experiential as much as one can do, and we'll touch on after the break, mental rehearsal as well. Create new pathways in the brain, neuroplasticity. Okay, new highways in the brain. I've worked with people who do things that shouldn't happen from a scientific point of view. I'm not implying that, you know, we want to build people up and say, you know what, you just suffered a major injury, you're going to go out there and no, I'm not implying that. But what I'm implying is that we can all be the very best we can be and uncover every stone and the narrative of hope rather than despair. Okay, and along the way we're going to have situations we go up and down, and that's okay. It's normal to feel that way. Okay, so after, I'm going to give you, is 5 minutes okay for everybody? To just have a stretch and have a drink of water, and I'm going to go through some stuff with you after the break. Thank you.